If your airbags ever deploy, your Subaru does 3 things in the same second without being asked. It unlocks every door, it turns on the hazards, and it shuts off the fuel pump. You paid for that. It's been in the car since the day you bought it. Nobody mentioned it at delivery. Here's one you can check from where you're sitting. Take out your key fob. There's a small release on the back. Slide it, and a metal key blade comes out of the housing. That blade opens your door when the fob battery is dead, and your driver's door has a keyhole for it. Most people find out it exists in a parking garage, at night, in the rain. 10 of these, all of them already paid for. 6 of the 10 are on every Subaru built in the last 15 years, and those come first. The last 4 depend on your trim and model year, and I'll tell you exactly what to look for, and what your car has instead if it doesn't have that one. Nothing here costs money. Nothing needs a dealer. Most of it you can confirm in your driveway in the next 20 minutes. Number 1, the key blade, because it's the one you just found, and there's more to it than the blade itself. Slide the release on your fob, and the metal key comes free. Now look at your driver's door handle. On some Subarus, the keyhole is right there, exposed. On a lot of them, it's hidden under a small plastic cap at the end of the handle. You pop that cap off, usually by prying gently with the key blade itself or by inserting the blade into a slot underneath. That's deliberate. The cap is there for looks, and the fact that it's there is exactly why people standing in the rain conclude their car has no keyhole at all. There's a second half to this that matters more. Getting in doesn't start the car. If the fob battery is dead, the push-button start won't see it either. Every Subaru with keyless start has a backup for that, and it's usually one of 2 methods. Hold the fob itself directly against the start button and press, or place the fob in a specific spot, often a marked pocket in the center console or on the steering column, so a short-range coil can read it without battery power. Which one your car uses is in the owner's manual under the keyless section. Find out which one yours is tonight while you're comfortable. A dead fob battery gives you no warning, and the failure always happens somewhere inconvenient. Number 2, what your car does the instant a crash is detected. When the airbag control module registers a deployment-level impact, it triggers a sequence you have no part in. All doors unlock. The hazard lights start flashing. The fuel pump is cut so fuel stops being delivered to a possibly damaged engine bay. On most models, the interior lights come on as well. Every one of those exists for a specific reason that isn't obvious until you think about the minutes after a serious crash. Doors unlock because the people who arrive first are usually bystanders without tools, and a locked door on a car with an unconscious occupant costs time nobody has. Hazards come on because you may be stopped in a live traffic lane and unable to reach the button. And the fuel cut is the difference between a damaged car and a burning one. Here's the part worth knowing as an owner. Because the doors unlock automatically, a crash also leaves your car open, which matters at the roadside afterward. And because the fuel pump is disabled, a car that was drivable after a minor deployment may crank and refuse to start. That is not additional damage. It's the safety system doing its job, and it needs to be reset with a scan tool. Number 3 is the one that ends an argument that has been running for 20 years, and it's on your car right now. It's called brake override. If the system detects that you're pressing the brake pedal firmly and the accelerator at the same time, it reduces engine power and lets the brakes win. Every modern Subaru has it, and it's been standard across the industry for well over a decade. Now, I am specifically not going to tell you to test this one in your driveway, and I want to explain why. Because it's more useful than the test would be. If you press the brake first and then the accelerator, the override engages and the engine backs off. But the logic is order-dependent on many vehicles, and the failure case of a botched driveway experiment is a car that lurches forward into a garage door. There's no version of that test that's worth the information. What matters is that you know it exists, because of what it means for the most frightening thing that happens to drivers: the car that seems to accelerate on its own. In that moment, the instinct is to pump the brakes, or to reach for the shifter, or to look down at the pedals. The correct action is to press the brake pedal hard and hold it. One firm, continuous application, both feet if you need to. Hold it, and the car is designed to stop. The other thing that ends that scenario, press and hold the start button for several seconds while moving, and the engine shuts off. Steering and brakes both stay functional, they just get heavier. Number 4, and this one is for the grandparents in the audience, which on this channel is a lot of you. Look in the gap between the seat cushion and the seat back of your rear seats. You'll find 2 small metal bars. Those are lower anchors. Now look behind the rear seats, on the seat back, or on the cargo floor. There are tether anchors, usually marked with a small icon that looks like a seat with an anchor under it. That's LATCH, the standardized system for installing child seats without threading a seatbelt. Most people know it exists. Here's the part almost nobody knows. There is a weight limit on the lower anchors themselves. The rule is that when the combined weight of the child plus the child seat reaches 65 pounds, you stop using the lower anchors and install the seat with the seatbelt instead. The anchors are engineered to a specific load, and a heavier child in a heavy seat exceeds what they were tested for. That surprises people because it feels backwards. A bigger child sounds like it needs the stronger attachment, but the seatbelt system is rated for an adult, so it's the stronger option, not the weaker one. The top tether is separate, and it is not optional. It goes on for every forward-facing seat, every time, whether you used the lower anchors or the belt. It's the strap that stops the child's seat rotating forward in a crash, and it measurably reduces how far the child's head travels. Skipping the tether is the single most common child seat installation error there is. Number 5. Costs nothing, takes 2 minutes, and is worth more in a crash than most of the electronics in the car. 3 adjustments, and almost everyone has at least one of them wrong. First, your head restraint. That's not a pillow, and it isn't there for comfort. It's the part that stops your head snapping backwards in a rear-end impact. It works when the top of it is level with the top of your head, and when the gap between it and the back of your skull is as small as you can tolerate. Most people have it too low, which turns it into a pivot point instead of a stop. Second, your distance from the steering wheel. An airbag deploys in a fraction of a blink, and it deploys with force because it has to get in front of you before you get to it. The general recommendation is at least 10 inches between your breastbone and the center of the wheel. If you drive with your chest close to the hub, very common with shorter drivers who slide forward to reach the pedals, you are inside the inflation zone. If you can't get 10 inches and still reach the pedals comfortably, that's what the telescoping wheel and the seat height adjuster are for. Third, your shoulder belt height. Most Subarus have an adjuster on the B-pillar that slides up and down. The belt should cross the middle of your collarbone, not against your neck, and not falling off your shoulder. Too high and it chafes, so people slide it under their arm, which in a crash puts the entire load into soft tissue instead of bone. Too low, and your torso moves further before the belt catches. Head restraint up, 10 inches of air, belt across the collarbone. 2 minutes. Number 6. And again, this one is for anyone who ever puts kids in the back. Open a rear door all the way and look at the edge of the door itself, the part that faces forward when the door is closed. There's a small lever or a rotary slot there, usually marked with a lock icon. That's the child safety lock. Flip it, and that rear door can no longer be opened from the inside. It still opens normally from the outside. Each rear door has its own, so you can lock one side and not the other. It's purely mechanical. No electronics, no menu, and it works on every car in the parking lot, not just yours. It exists because a curious 4-year-old can reach a door handle at a stoplight, and because a door that opens while moving is a fatal problem rather than an inconvenient one. The companion to it is on the driver's door panel, the window lockout button, usually marked with a crossed-out window icon. Press it, and the passenger window switches stop working while yours keeps functioning. The reason isn't just annoyance, it's that a power window closing on an arm or a neck generates real force, and small children operate switches by climbing on them. Both of those take 1 second each, and neither costs anything. If you're the grandparent whose car gets used for school pickup twice a week, set them once and forget them. Number 7. Hard braking makes your car talk to the driver behind you. On most recent Subarus, an emergency level brake application, hard pressure, high deceleration, automatically triggers the hazard lights or a rapid brake light flash. It switches itself off once you're stopped or once you resume normal speed. The purpose is a distracted driver behind you. Normal brake lights say slowing. Flashing lights say something is happening right now, and that difference is worth a fraction of a second of reaction time, which at highway speed is a car length or more. two things follow. If you've ever had someone tell you your hazards were flashing when you didn't touch them, this is why. And if it has never happened to you, it may be that you've simply never braked hard enough to trigger it, or your model year doesn't include it. It's not something you can activate manually. Number 8 is where we start getting into equipment that depends on your car, so here's how to check before I describe it. Look at your side mirrors. If there's a small amber or orange icon in the upper outer corner of the mirror glass, usually a car shape with wavy lines beside it, you have blind spot detection, which Subaru calls rear vehicle detection. It's generally on 2015 and newer cars on the higher trims. If your mirrors are plain glass, you don't have it. And what you have instead is the mirror itself, which means the head check remains mandatory. That's not a consolation prize. A driver who checks over their shoulder is safer than a driver who trusts an icon. If you do have it, there's a self-test worth doing once. Find an empty parking lot and have someone walk slowly past your rear quarter, or park beside a lane and watch the icon as cars come past. You're confirming that both sides actually illuminate. These sensors sit inside the rear bumper corners, and they can be degraded by a bumper repair, a thick aftermarket bumper cover, or even a heavy coat of paint over the sensor zone. A blind spot system that quietly stopped working on one side is worse than not having one, because you've spent years learning to trust it. The same sensors run rear cross traffic alert, which watches for cars approaching from the sides while you reverse out of a parking space. That one earns its keep more than the blind spot function does, because backing out between two tall vehicles is a situation where a human genuinely cannot see. But you need to know what these sensors miss, because trusting a system past its limits is worse than not having it. They are radar units looking out through plastic, and they are calibrated for the size and closing speed of a car. A motorcycle presents a much smaller target and often approaches far faster than the system expects. Riders will tell you they live in other people's blind spots, and a blind spot monitor does not change that. Bicycles are worse, and anything closing at a large speed differential can move from outside the detection zone into your door before the icon has a reason to light. They also stop working when they're covered. Snow packed into the rear bumper corners, a coating of road salt slush, thick mud after a dirt road. Any of that blocks the sensor, and depending on the model, you may get a warning message, or you may simply get nothing at all. If you drive in winter, clearing those corners is part of clearing the car, the same as the windshield. Which brings back the point from a minute ago. The head check stays. These systems are a second opinion on a decision you already made, not a substitute for making it. Number 9, the button in your ceiling, and the honest version of what it does. Look at the overhead console near the map lights. On many Subarus from about 2016 onward, there's an SOS button behind a small cover, usually alongside a button with an eye on it. The idea is straightforward. Press SOS and the car connects to a response center over a built-in cellular modem, transmits your location, and puts you through to an operator. In a severe crash, it can trigger automatically. For a driver alone on a rural road, that's a genuinely valuable thing to have. Now the part you need to know, and it's the reason this is on the list rather than in a brochure. That system runs on a cellular modem, and cellular networks get retired. The 3G shutdown took connected services offline on a large number of vehicles across the industry, including Subarus from roughly the 2016 to 2019 window. Some owners were offered hardware upgrades, many were not, and plenty of people are driving cars today with an SOS button that connects to nothing. There's also a subscription layer. Some of these services require an active plan, and coverage tiers changed over the years. So the action item is a phone call, not a button press. Ask your dealer 2 questions. Is the telematics unit in my specific car still supported, and is my service active? If the answer is no, that's worth knowing before the night you need it, because a button that does nothing is more dangerous than no button at all. You'll wait for help that was never called. Number 10 is capability rather than electronics, and it changes what your car can do on a surface where most cars can't do anything. If you have a button marked X mode, center console, or touchscreen, generally 2014 and newer on models with the CVT, You have a mode that reprograms several systems at once. It changes throttle response so you get finer control at low speed. It holds the all-wheel drive clutch tighter so power stays distributed instead of reacting after a slip. And it makes the traction control far more aggressive about braking a spinning wheel. The part almost nobody uses is hill descent control, which lives inside X mode on most implementations. Engage it on a steep, loose downhill, and the car holds a slow, fixed speed by itself, braking individual wheels as needed, with your feet off both pedals. On gravel or snow, going downhill, that is dramatically better than what a human can do, because the system can brake one wheel at a time and you can only brake all four. Two limits that matter. X mode generally disengages above roughly 20 to 25 miles per hour, because it's a low-speed traction tool, not a snow mode for the highway. And it does not create grip. On summer tires and snow, X mode will make you feel more capable, while you are exactly as likely to slide off the road. If your car doesn't have X mode, you still have symmetrical all-wheel drive doing the same fundamental job continuously, which is more than most crossovers can say. Let's put it together. 6 of these are on your car regardless of trim or year. The key blade in your fob and the backup start method, the automatic post-crash sequence, brake override, the latch anchors with their 65-pound limit, the 3-seat adjustments, and the child locks. That's most of the list, and none of it is optional equipment. The other 4 depend on what you bought. The brake flash signal, blind spot detection, the SOS system, and X mode with hill descent. Here's the thing that struck me putting this together. Every one of these is a safety system somebody engineered, tested, certified, and installed in your car, and the majority of owners will drive the vehicle for a decade without knowing it's there. Not because it's hidden, because nobody has 30 minutes at delivery, and the manual is 400 pages, and the salesperson wanted to show you the sound system. You paid for all of it either way. So, do the 2 that take the longest and matter the most. Go get your fob, pop the key blade out, and find the keyhole on your driver's door. Pop the cap off if there is one, and make sure the blade actually turns. Then sit in the driver's seat and fix the 3 adjustments. Head restraint level with the top of your head, 10 inches to the steering wheel, belt across the middle of your collarbone. Then tell me in the comments which one of these you didn't know about. And specifically, tell me whether your door had a hidden cap over the keyhole or an exposed one, because that varies by model, and I'd like to see the pattern. And if the SOS section raised a question about what else in your car is connected and what happens when it isn't. That's the same system that drains batteries on these cars while they sit. Watch why your Subaru battery keeps dying. Next. The module behind that button never fully sleeps, and it's the reason a Subaru that sat for a week won't start.